When you add up the four most commonly diagnosed cancers, breast, lung, colorectal, and prostate, they still only make up about half of all cancer types diagnosed around the world, leaving many, many people diagnosed with rare cancers. There is already enough potential baggage that comes with a cancer diagnosis, but for many it can be exponentially worse when they are diagnosed with a rare cancer or diagnosed with a cancer in a body part that isn't comfortable talking about. This can lead to silence, feelings of abandonment, shame, guilt, and blank stares. And none of that is okay. In this episode of the Recovery Room podcast, we talk with a woman who has dealt with all of this after being diagnosed with a cancer that not only is less than 1% of all cancers, it happened in a body part that can be a bit cringy to talk about. This insightful episode 11 conversation is dedicated to the millions of people diagnosed with rarer cancers. You may feel alone, but please know you aren't. Whether you are podcast watching or listening, I appreciate you being here. I'm cancer physical therapist, Dr. Leslie Walke. Please hang around until after the show to learn how you and I can engage directly in my incredible cancer survivor membership group, Recovery Room Plus. This is the Recovery Room podcast, discussing all things cancer and cancer recovery. We bring you the experts' accuracy, understanding, and next steps you need to be healthier, more confident, make better decisions, and live your best life after cancer. I will always say there's two kinds of people on the planet. There's people that know someone with cancer, and there's people that will eventually know someone with cancer, right? It's that prevalent. But not all cancers are popular. Okay, the most common are your colon cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, and lung cancer. Those are the big four, right? So, but most people don't get a popular cancer. And that can come with stigma and self-blame and making it really sensitive to talk about, or you get a blank stare of it's bad enough to say I have cancer and then somebody's, oh, what's that? You know, that just doesn't, it doesn't help. I mean, if you get prostate cancer, if you get breast cancer, you're like, oh, the people know what it is, right? So there can be a lot of complexities about living with an unpopular cancer or a cancer of a body part that's not as comfortable to talk about. So that's why, welcome, Erin Sullivan-Wagner, to the Recovery Room podcast. Because you're going to talk to us about this today as a cancer survivor yourself. So from the perspective, and you're a sexual health coach, and you talk about this. So again, one of the best steps to changing these problems that we have for people who are living with these cancers is the first way you're going to normalize it is to start talking about it. You know, say these words on air because they are body parts no different than an ovary or a lung or a brain. We all have the same body parts. So I'm glad to have you here. So Erin, can you just start by just tell us your cancer story? You are a cancer survivor. Let us share your story with us.
Sure. And thanks for asking. You know, nobody has really ever asked to hear the details of this. And
yeah, that's another thing. You don't feel like you get to talk about it and celebrate it. There's probably no t-shirt for you, right?
Right. And it is.
And nobody's holding a walk for you.
Right. It feels a little cringy. So when I was diagnosed with anal cancer, it was a confusing diagnosis, and it didn't start out as an anal cancer diagnosis. So I had some blood with a bowel movement, and that was odd for me. I was 49 years old.
Yeah, it's very odd. Yep.
And I hadn't had a history of hemorrhoids, so I knew something was wrong. So went to see my gynecologist, and soon with a colonoscopy discovered that there was a tumor inside the anal canal, just really right inside the anal canal.
Yep. So not to interrupt you, but just to back up. So there's the small intestine, and then there's the colon, which is the big part. So you can get cancer in both of those places. Then the rectum is like the last few inches of the colon. So you can get a colon cancer, you can get a rectal cancer, you can get a small bowel cancer. And then the anus is the very last piece where the where stool exits the body. And that's where, if you have a tumor there, it is called anal cancer. So
that's correct.
There we go. Yeah.
So at the time, of course, I've never heard of this, but at the time, they didn't give it that diagnosis either. They said that we need you to come back. We've got some concerns. We see some GYN characteristics to the tumor. At this time, they were saying rectal. And when I went back down, had a CT scan, which was not the scan to have in retrospect, but did a CT scan, they could see what looked like a mass above the cervix. So they believed that the tumor was actually not the home of the tumor.
Not the original location. Yeah.
And so maybe this was advanced cancer. So for about 48 hours, I had life-threatening advanced cancer.
Yeah.
So I went back down and had every, scan. They had to do an MRI. I had to meet with just everyone, do the, everything they could do to either, convince them and myself that this wasn't advanced cancer or that it truly was. So throughout all of that, I met several physicians that day, and one was a colorectal surgeon. So early on in the day, I was told by a gynecologist that was an oncologist that he didn't think that my cervix was cancerous. So didn't think that that was an advanced, and that chances are this is just anal cancer. And I remember hearing that and thought,
yeah.
And what the hell is that? Has anybody ever heard of that? I didn't even know really how to respond to it.
Right.
Anyway, so I saw the colorectal surgeon, who I had been warned was quirky, really compassionate, cared a lot about her patients, but hey, just be warned, she's quirky. She says stuff. She's a little off the wall.
Okay. Yeah.
So we waited.
You need a colon surgeon, right?
Right. And I had heard that she was world renowned, and so that was all fine, that she was going to be a little quirky. Well, we walked in, my husband and I walked in the room, and she said, I used to see this only in gay men, and now I see it in women your age.
Yeah.
And this anal cancer. So I remember at that moment thinking, why do I have anal cancer?
Yeah.
What could this be about?
Yeah. What does that mean? Are you being accused of something, or what? Yeah. That's not helpful information.
No, but really where my mind went was, I remember that party. I remember that night. I remember that exploring anal sex. I remember at the time me thinking, okay, this is for some people, it's not for me. And that's where my mind went. Am I going to have to talk to my mom about that?
Yeah.
And as she talked throughout the hour, probably, I had the hardest time just concentrating on what she was saying, because I kept thinking about my mother.
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. And you are not alone. This is totally normal to feel like, wow, and your brain is off over here. Why you got a cancer doctor talking about it saving your life, but you're like, I'm not worried about that right now. I'm not talking to my mom.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Or your children or whatever. Yes.
Cancer. Anyway, she said, don't worry about it, honey. They're going to give you a dildo down in radiation. You'll be all fine.
Oh my God. And I mean, those are all important things, valid things to talk about, but that's not what you throw at somebody when they walk in the door. I mean, you can, and she obviously warned you, but boy, there are better ways to communicate than just because you're communicating doesn't mean you can do it better or at a more appropriate time. So on behalf of all healthcare, I will apologize for that, because that's just not okay. I mean, you're already in a stressful situation that ramped up your stress inappropriately, and that's not helpful as a healthcare provider. My job is to decrease your stress, increase your understanding, and then give you a pathway to walk that allows you to make the best decisions. And that didn't do that for you. So
that day, that early, that early diagnosis, that confusion and pain that really just goes along with the diagnosis.
Yeah.
It was difficult for me to even know how to voice, how to ask a question.
Yes. Yes.
My concern was my concern was my mother, which feels a little displaced too. But I was afraid I was going to have to talk about anal sex that I had with years ago. I was afraid I was going to have to do just exactly what I am doing right now, justifying why I have anal cancer. So does it have anything to do with anal sex at that point? Because gay men have it. I thought, of course, that's what it has. the concern, the fear, the kind of stigma was all just right there. And I didn't know how to ask a question about, so what does this mean? Is that because of that experience? What would have been helpful is if she had said, this is an HPV cancer, which is typical, is really high, a high percentage in the gay male population too. And, has to do with cervical cancer too. Had she given me anything that would have let me hang my hat on some normalcy to it instead of this, this is so odd that this older woman is getting a disease that gay men have.
Yeah. So HPV is the human papillomavirus, and HPV is incredibly common. It's way more than 50% of the population has HPV. Most people don't even know they have it. You didn't know that you had it. And in 99% of the people, it's never going to cause a problem. It kind of just fades away and is an issue, but sometimes it can cause problems. So that's what happened in your case. So again, if you have a body part, it can get cancer. So you can get penis cancer. You can get vulva cancer. Any body part can pretty much get cancer. So there is, talking about stigma and blame, our fellow humans that get lung cancer. Lung cancer kills more people than breast, prostate, and colon cancer combined. But you know what? Nobody's out there rallying and doing walks, and because if you get lung cancer, it's like, well, you shouldn't have smoked.
Right.
And I kind of like the HPV thing in your situation is, yes, approximately 90% of people who get lung cancer, 80 to 90%, have a history of smoking. But 95% of people that smoke will never get cancer.
Right.
So there is not necessarily a cause and this is a blame, or it's not a direct relationship. So we've got to be comfortable using words that are not in the lexicon, and maybe it's not going to come up in happy hour conversation, but when you are talking about health and cancer and body parts and medicine, you got to be able to say these words, right?
It would have been kind of nice for her to have said dilator tool instead of dildo.
Right. And not on the second that she's meeting you, because you're like, why do I need that?
Well, for sure. And here's what I thought, honestly. Wonder where I'm supposed to put that.
Yes, exactly.
Wonder what she thinks I'm doing with the dildo. Does she think that's going to go in the anal canal? I remember thinking it. What am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
I have no idea that there was sexual health issues that were going to be caused, that was going to have problems because of the treatment, that dilator tools would be needed in my vagina. I didn't know any of that.
Yeah. So just so people understand it, it's not a topic that we're talking about today, but because people are wondering why did she need that? So tell us why you needed a dilator.
Sure. So
and not just you, but anybody that's going through the treatment that you were going through is going to need it. It's not you. It's the treatment. So why does somebody going through treatment for anal cancer potentially need a dilator?
Well, so mostly it's because of the radiation damage to the pelvic area. So the vagina shortens, there's atrophy. So everything just kind of shrinks. And anybody who's had radiation to their chest wall, or their thigh, you can just feel the tissue shrinking. So vaginal canal is going to shrink. The vagina itself can shrink. It just gets shrink. The rectum can shrink a little bit. Everything can shrink. And when stuff shrinks, it can hurt, because you got to use that stuff. And so that's why they give you, again, the dilators get progressively larger or longer or whatever you need for your body type. Everybody's body sizes are different, but they help just kind of like for your chest. You can do stretches. To stretch the rectum, to stretch the vaginal canal, you have to use an inserted dilator that just progressively gets to the size that your life requires. So thank you for that digression there, because it's important to talk about that. So we've talked about self-blame and stigma, which, are there, but shouldn't be. So I'm glad we're talking about this to take this load off of other people, regardless of what kind of, because I remember a friend of mine's father died of penis cancer. And it's like, everybody's rallying around everybody else's dad who dies of cancer. But she's just like, I don't really want to talk about it. And that's not fair. Cancer is cancer, and it really is unfortunate that you have to worry about what other people think or having people ask stupid questions, and no questions are stupid, but sometimes they can be a little offensive or just,
again, we want open dialogue and questions, but sometimes people will ask things that may just come off a little insensitive. Did you run into that?
No, actually, people were pretty silenced when I'd say it.
Yeah, or just dumbfounded, like they don't even know what to say.
Did not know what to say.
Okay.
And you can get anal cancer without having anal sex.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Which is what I found myself over explaining.
Yeah.
And that was wrong. So I can see, I can see it now. I can look back and think I'll just take the question right out of your mouth by just explaining that it doesn't mean that we have anal sex. Not that, and of course, that is the next question. The next thing you want to say, like Jerry Seinfeld, not that there's anything wrong with it. She's over explaining. It's impossible.
Yeah. But let's talk about your kids, because you have children, and they were in what, high school when you went through this?
Like sixth grade and ninth grade. So really, tough years to begin with. Yeah. So share us that experience. Of course, they were, at first just scared about having a tough time.
Don't want to lose their mom, right?
Right. So for 48 hours, we were all pretty scared. And then after that, it was more getting used to, are you going to be okay? And what the symptoms were. And everything was pretty good until it was pretty impossible not to talk about it. So when people started to learn that I had cancer, it was brought up at school, teachers would ask about it. And it was really tough for those two girls to figure out how to navigate a conversation about anal cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when they came home and asked me if they could call it something else. Yeah. So friends ask, can we call it colorectal? It's almost colorectal. Wouldn't it have been rectal if, it was just kind of begging us to have a different diagnosis.
Right. Yeah. If it was just an inch to the left, it would have been rectal cancer. Yeah. So how did you navigate that? What did you do?
I really kind of made some fun of it. And this isn't necessarily going to be what everybody should do.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did is thought about it and said, I need to embrace this, you guys. I have anal cancer. You have a choice. You can call it anal cancer, or you can call it asshole cancer, because that's what it is.
Right.
And they said, Mom, you just don't get it. You don't get it,
Yeah.
You don't understand. But I decided I wasn't going to call it something else. And I knew they weren't going to call it asshole cancer. We all got kind of comfortable with the word anal, even though it had never been used in our house. I mean,
sure, exactly.
Use that word. That word never get used in a sentence.
Yeah.
We all got pretty comfortable with it. And, so comfortable with it that we really didn't think of it as an asshole. It was anal cancer. So we all
part of the body. Yep.
Being okay. And what's interesting is the sooner you're okay, everybody else is okay then too. It just takes you feeling comfortable in your own skin for everybody else to feel comfortable in theirs.
Yeah. And I think it takes people a different amount of time to get there, and a different amount of saying it out loud to get comfortable. But if you never say it out loud, you're not going to get comfortable. And people absolutely will read your discomfort level. But if you normalize something, people are like, oh, okay, I guess I didn't know about that. It's pretty normal to have that. And so people are going to take your lead for sure. And then again, we want people to ask questions. We want people to be fair. So open conversation. And, until we can get stuff more normalized, again, this is just not that it's not talked about, but it's just not very common either. And that's another issue, because boy, back in the 70s and even into the 80s, but in the 40s, 50s and 60s, if you got breast cancer, you did not talk about it. Right. You were not allowed. And again, that was normal, and it was not normal. You don't say the word breast in public. You don't talk about your breast. You don't touch your breast, and you get cancer there. Right. So it really wasn't until, the early 90s when women started saying, this is not okay. I have breast, I have cancer. I had surgery. This is what it looks like. And we are going to normalize this conversation. And now kind of falling into that is men with breast cancer, because again, they have so much stigma, and they get a lot of dumb looks like, how'd you get that? That doesn't happen. What happened to you? What'd you do wrong? It's just so.
We did them a favor by calling it the chest wall.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, so chest wall cancer. It's like, well, no, it's breast cancer.
Exactly.
Men have breasts, and breasts occasionally happens less often in men than it does in women, but they can get breast cancer. So now you are just starting to see Facebook pages for men. And when you hear about Breast Cancer Awareness Month, they talk about female breast cancer. They talk about metastatic breast cancer. They talk about male breast cancer.
Right.
So we are making grounds in these areas, and it's because of you, people like you, Erin, that have the bravery to talk to their parents, talk to their children, and begin to normalize these conversations, because that's the only way it's going to get better. It's the only way it's going to get better.
You know, Leslie, I should tell you that I did end up talking to my mom and asking her. I just said, I want honest here. When I told you I had anal cancer, did you think at all about what that meant for behavior I have in the bedroom?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, just for a second.
And again, who cares about that? Who cares?
Right. I tell the reason I asked her though, is because I was still justifying it. I was still making sure she knew how normal I was. Yeah. That she didn't have any thoughts about anything. I know that's why I asked her, is because I wanted to set the record straight, because I was still concerned, just because of the stigma, Yep.
So before we wrap up, so for most people, for most women anyway, that go to, do their annual exams of their pelvic floor, pap smear and all that stuff, is routinely part of that should be a rectal exam. Okay. So that happens for most people, but not everybody.
It doesn't happen for everybody.
Yeah. So if when you talk to your primary care, whoever's doing your annual physical that includes a pap smear or just a check of your pelvic floor, is just check. Listen, is this a rectal exam typically in the stuff that you're looking for? Just to rule, because it's easy to rule out, and catch early if it's there.
Right. So they're even going to anal pap programs. So there are, that's going to become a thing too, where you can have an anal pap, not just a vaginal pap.
Yep. Perfect. So Erin, we often, when we talk to cancer survivors, wrap up our show with the question: if you had the opportunity to write a letter to cancer, what would your first few sentences be?
There is so much emotion around a cancer journey that it's hard to not be emotional about that. It was literally such a pain in my ass.
There you go. That's good.
But I wouldn't trade it for all it taught me. And I didn't appreciate it then. And I'm really not being Pollyanna at all about this. And it's just amazing how challenges and those struggles can really be small gifts in terms of learning and opening your space of awareness and who you want to be in the world. And it did that. So I guess I'd be thankful for that pain in the ass, but but in the moment, of course, scared to death. So I don't expect cancer patients just to be thankful for diagnosis.
Right. Yeah. But I our audience is probably right there with you when we talk about, because many people will say, life has been so much better for me after cancer. Some people, I've even heard people say, cancer is the best thing that ever happened to me. And I'm like, I don't know if I would go that far for most people. But when you lose the light, when the light is taken from you, when the potential of your life and your future as you expected it is potentially taken away from you or threatened for a time being, is when you step beyond that the small glimmers of light that have always been there that you never saw before, or the appreciation for your feet, for your legs, for your knees, for your back, for your heart, for your lungs, for your spirit, that comes through when your life is threatened.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sure. That's true, Leslie. I think it's easy for me, and it's easy for cancer survivors who had survivable cancer, to make these comments that maybe to some people seem a little flippant, because metastatic breast cancer, nobody's on the other side of that saying, I'm so thankful for cancer diagnosis. So I guess I just want to be clear that I knew, I felt like I had cancer with a small c because it was stage 1 and it was anal cancer and it's survivable cancer, and more than 90% of people do. So I can look back and be thankful for the experience that it opened up my life to have. But I don't necessarily think that everybody should be able to do that by any means.
Yep. And that's why I love asking that question to everybody, because everybody's answer is so different, because cancer affects people differently. And again, cancers are so different. Again, not a kind of a positive attitude doesn't cure cancer. And a bad attitude doesn't cause cancer. So it's not like you can just be happy and everything's going to be fine, because there are some cancers that leave people literally broken for a lifetime. Hopefully not emotionally and spiritually, but physically for sure. There are scars that just don't heal, and pains that just don't go away, and symptoms that can last for years or decades. So that is a wonderful point. Well taken. Well, Erin, thank you so much for taking time to be on the show with us today. And I really appreciate, and again, I don't know your bravery, but that's really kind of what this is, because a lot of people wouldn't sit here and talk so openly about this. But again, it's people like you and conversations like this that will take what anal cancer is now, what penis cancer is, what vulva cancer is now, like breast cancer was back in the 1950s. We don't want people suffering in silence. Suffering is horrible. Let's not make people do it in silence.
Well, thanks for bringing the topic up and wanting me to talk about it.
Yeah. So for those of you folks watching, let us know in the comments section, are you living with a cancer that you feel stigmatizes you, or that you feel like you don't get the popular parades and stuff? Because your experiences matter, and your opinions matter, and your life matters. So let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. And thank you again for tuning into the Recovery Room podcast. We'll talk soon. Thanks, Erin. And thanks everybody for watching. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Before we get to the recap, if you found episode 11 interesting, helpful, or insightful, please share it and all the wonderful free resources of the Recovery Room with your support groups, family, friends, and medical teams. And if you haven't already, please also hit the subscribe and follow buttons. I also have an incredible cancer survivor community membership group called Recovery Room Plus. I would love you to consider joining. In Recovery Room Plus, you get direct interaction with me, in-depth cancer recovery info and experts, and really cool live events like yoga, book discussions, cooking demos, member meets, and much more. I would love to connect with you. You can learn more at recoveryroompluss.com. The link is in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in. If this conversation struck a chord for you, please leave your thoughts and stories in the comments, and/or leave us a message on the Recovery Room podcast voicemail at 1-414-373-0700. Everyone diagnosed with cancer deserves to feel supported, heard, and appreciated. So let's continue the conversation about rare cancers and cancers diagnosed in non-typical body parts, so we can normalize the language and help end the stigma and the self-blamed. Everyone diagnosed with cancer should get a t-shirt, and you deserve to be celebrated. I'm your host, cancer physical therapist, Dr. Leslie Walke, signing out from the Recovery Room podcast. Let's talk again soon.